And welcome to another edition of Inside City Hall. My name is Frank Boyles. I'm the Prior Lake City Manager. Well, as you well know, Prior Lake has many, many parks. We have, as a matter of fact, 54 parks, some neighborhood, some community, some natural, all beautiful parks. The park we would like to focus in on today, however, is the Rotary Gateway to Lakefront Park, or if you want to say it in reverse, the Rotary Gateway to the downtown. It is a connecting park in our downtown area. And we want to tell you a little bit more about it. We have Lowell Pajari here. Lowell is a sculptor who did some very important work on the Gateway Park, and we'll talk a little bit about the park as we go. But Lowell, let's start with a little bit about you. So Lowell Pajari is an artist. You weren't always an artist, right? It sounds like you've kind of gone through an evolution in your life. Tell us a little bit about that, will you?
Well, almost 20 years ago, I was doing landscaping, and I'd been landscaping for some time and building water features in people's yards, and built one in my home, and didn't have lighting and didn't find any I really was interested in. So I tried my hand at making outdoor lighting, and I sold the first one I made, and it went from there. Now I've become a supplier to many contractors for outdoor lighting, garden lighting, and I do outdoor sculptures as well, wildlife sculptures. I do people's requests. That's really what I like to do, is get input from the public, requests of things they would like to see and have in their yard, and then work on the project with them.
So 20 years ago, you started as a landscaper primarily, and then convert into an artist. But it sounds like there's still a little bit of a balance there because you've got the lighting system going together with the sculpture. Is that accurate?
Yes. Well, I got into doing the lighting because of the need for my garden. And that was almost 20 years ago, 19 years ago.
That's pre-sculpture.
Yes,
right?
It was pre-sculpture. I was
okay.
actually just doing pathway lighting fixtures for of all different styles.
Gotcha.
Some very decorative and some not so decorative.
Right.
And now I have a line of different types of lighting for the landscape. But the requests for sculptures, monuments, and things of that sort are really the interesting part of my work, because it takes a lot of thought, a lot of development. Normally I start with an image in my head, and I don't even do a sketch. When I heard of the project here in Prior Lake, I had in mind a project for an art show that I was going to bring the piece to Colorado. But it worked out so much better here. The title of the piece, Marshland, that we put in here is so much like our area we live in. It just worked out really well, and it was much better than taking it to an art show. It's something that is nice to do for the community, because I've lived here for 45 years, and it's nice to make that contribution.
Sure. So you do travel around from art show to art show during the course of the year?
Occasionally, yes. Occasionally I go to do some art shows. I don't do a lot of art shows.
Yeah.
The outdoor lighting is primarily what I do, and like I said, I do it mostly for contractors.
Really? So you get a base lighting kit or something like that, and then you adapt it for the kind of garden you're serving, or the sculpture?
Well, I have many styles of lighting, and people pick out some of our floral lighting for styled lighting for a garden, or I have geometric styles for the landscape, and they actually mix pretty well together, where you can use different styles throughout the landscape. Because they're all organic looking, and they're all one-of-a-kind pieces in actuality, it works out real well.
Gotcha. And the sculpture that you did, and we've got some pictures of that that we will go to a little later in the show, but the sculpture that you did also has lighting highlighting the sculpture itself, right?
Yes, the sculpture that I didn't include the lighting in the sculpture like I sometimes do.
Oh,
Sometimes
I see. Really incorporate it right in.
Yes, I will incorporate the lighting right in the sculpture.
Mm-hmm.
This one I didn't do that. It's lit from the outside with LED lighting.
Mm-hmm.
I have a company that I work with, Accentual Lighting,
Mm-hmm.
and Tony Schmidt has been doing my lighting for when people need a design and installation. I've used him to do that because of the quality of the work he does.
Sure.
So he did this for me as a favor, putting this in. And I think he did a really nice job. It really ties the area together and creates a moment.
Sure. And there's actually more than one contribution or donation here. There's that individual's donation, but you also donated the lighting itself, right? I mean, there was a value in that lighting that was never really contemplated by the Rotary, who sponsored the competition.
Yes, I did.
You just came in and added those things.
Yes, I really felt that it needed it for safety and for the look, and just to make the project complete. I like a complete looking project, and I like lighting. And
There
so
you go. Yeah,
lighting is my business.
and we'll look later here and we'll see precisely that. So let's go back to sculpturing. So you can sculpture all kinds of things, right? You can sculpture marble, right? You can give me some. How did you go? You went to copper, right?
Yes, I went to copper because it's so forgiving, and I need forgiveness.
But will copper allow you to do mass? I mean, Marshland is, yes, you've got the ducks and the turtle and those sorts of things. There's mass there. But can you do large mass pieces, or maybe that's just not your interest?
Yes, yeah. The larger it goes, the more difficult it can become. Most pieces are done with multiple pieces. It's a conglomeration of many pieces put together, and I use brazing method to attach everything and
Sure.
turn it into one. But most sculptures are many, many pieces,
Yeah.
just as that one is.
And you referred to brazing. Brazing is what? Just
It's
in case someone
I
has
use
never
an
heard that word.
oxygen acetylene torch
Okay.
and copper phosphorus brazing rod, and fill in all the seams and make the logs and the turtles and the duck bills and feet and everything by
So that's
adding a braze.
So not only are you creating the various pieces that are within the entire piece, you're also connecting them together with brazing.
Yes.
It's like welding, is it? Is
It's-
that accurate?
yes,
or
it
is
is.
that-
It is a lot like welding.
Okay.
Yes, it is a lot like welding.
Okay. And so now you've got things attached together, etc. With copper, is there anything you do with the exterior to shine some aspects, to burnish other aspects so that it's darker? Is that something that's part of the process of sculpturing copper?
Yes, the patina comes on my work mostly from heat. There's always a lot of heat involved with the torch. It brings on a patina, and then that can be enhanced with other chemicals to where I can add some other hues to it, some reds or golds or another color that's blended in there subtly, and it gives it more dimension. And we also use a acid for turning them green if we want to age it ahead of time.
Sure. And that's what happens with copper exposed, right, to the elements. It kind of goes to this greenish.
Yes, it'll
so you can
eventually turn
actually
green.
stop that in certain places and enhance it in others?
Yes, and I use sealers on many of the projects to retain some of the color and the patina it starts with. It won't last forever. They will eventually break down in the UV light,
Sure.
and it will become a green colored sculpture like you would see on a cathedral roof.
Sure, sure. With Marshland, is that a matter of spraying? Because I can't envision you with a little tiny brush. Is that what you're doing?
No,
sometimes?
no, it's done pretty much with a wide brush. And buffing wheels, and you kind of have to highlight it afterwards. And
Sure.
sometimes it'll look a little dull when you finish.
Yeah. How do you know how to highlight it when it's not in position? Because position will give you a certain kind of light, certain times of day, that sort of thing. Are you kind of just how do you do that? I don't know how one would.
It's a little bit like you get what you get.
Okay.
There's a range of colors that will be produced on the copper, and there's a few variables that, as far as temperature and chemicals that you use on them, but they pretty much are within a window of the browns and golds and burnished reds and that sort of color combination when it's all finished.
Okay. And then when it's on some kind of base. I know there's the limestone, and then on the limestone, for lack of a better term, there's a grate that's been bored in there.
Yes.
And then Marshland is on top of that, and what is that? Is that screwed in then in some fashion to?
Marshland was mounted on the top of the grate using some brass bolts and brass 1-inch balls on the top decoratively
And
going
it's
around.
tough for anyone to try and remove it because we have to think about
yeah,
such
they're
things.
epoxied on there.
Okay.
It would be very difficult to remove them.
Gotcha. Well, that's the idea. Or lift the limestone. We want that to be not
Yes, it's hard to take home.
Sure. So now you get the sculpture all done. Okay, it's sitting there. Now, how do you and your friend go about lighting it? I mean, you've got. There you are. You must have had some ideas beforehand. Here's how I think I want to go ahead and light this sculpture.
Well, when it comes to lighting, I just call Tony Schmidt and say, help me design the lighting for this, or design the lighting for it.
That's kind of his specialty.
He's really very good at it. And I've gone to many jobs with him where we're looking to see what we can do for it. And he has done it so long and so well. He sees things much more quickly than I do in the area of what needs to be done. He knows the products very well and placement. In fact, he was the person who came and took the nighttime photographs for
That's great.
project, and I really appreciate that. He's better at that than I am. And
Looks good.
yeah, he did just a really tremendous job, and I appreciate his help.
Sure. Anything else? I was going to next kind of explore the park, and then kind of the last step of that, we will get to the sculpture and the couple of pictures that you're referring to. Is that okay, Lowell?
Sure.
Okay. So looking at our photo number 1 here of the Rotary Gateway Park to Lakefront Park, there's this kind of a monument, a sense of arrival. And that trail actually carries you right through the park a little bit circuitously until ultimately you have a choice to either go to your right, which would be right by Lakefront Plaza, or down into or onto the floating dock. Our maintenance staff actually put all of this material together. I'm not exactly sure how they got the metal work here, but I know they were working with someone else. And this too is lit. I know that they ran power so that this can be subtly lit during the evening hours. Behind that is also this little pergola, for lack of a better term. I think that's what it is. That too was completed by our maintenance crews. They just love this when they have the opportunity to show their creativeness and their craftsmanship. The bases, of course, of these echo the bases of the lights on our major downtown intersections, and so that's very intentional. Why don't we move on to our second picture, which is a shot of basically the outlet. As I recall, the intention here was to have a park that had a couple of rain gardens. When our downtown was originally created, stormwater was not, that didn't seem to be a priority, so we didn't make adequate preparation for long-term stormwater. And so these rain gardens are a relatively new creation, at least in this area, where we can treat the water in a kind of a very aesthetically pleasing way, but by the time it gets to a wetland or to Little Pryor, which is the water body just to the north side of this, that water can be pre-treated and we don't have particulates or potassium or various issues. Here, the number 3 is that is a full-scale picture of that rain garden, and the plantings now have been fully replaced. This would be the area that stays wet, and then of course it on either side there is kind of what would I call them? Areas basically that stay dry most of the time, although they certainly could accept water in higher water situations. Next is the water feature that was added, and so this is something that Lowell, you're familiar with, doing these kinds of things, although in this particular case, this is not your creation, and I'm sorry, I don't recall the contractor's name, but I thought they did a marvelous job. And it's not just the sight, it's the sound, you know, being able to hear that in the park day in and day out. And of course, it's shut down now, given our time of season. Now we're starting to move, Lowell, into your territory. One of the things that our parks crews did is they thought that the trees were a nice background, but putting in these fence sections really kind of provided an ending, if you will, at least right behind this area, to the park. And then, of course, right in the middle there is the limestone pad and the grate that we have referred to before. They put in a little walkway right behind. If we were standing here, literally right behind us would be a couple of benches that have the Rotary logo on there to emphasize the fact that it is the Rotary Gateway. And then the final picture that I have in front of me here is really a shot from that fence in the back looking forward to Dakota Street, and you can kind of get a sense. Lakefront Plaza is on our left, and then the pergola we talked about before, the entry, and of course down the right-hand side is the stone retaining wall and the water feature that's incorporated therein. A complete park when it gets right down to it. Why don't we turn the next page here? We now have, I think, I'm not sure if this is the day or, okay, this is the evening picture that was taken. It's just beautiful. It's got that warmth to it that really just, it makes it, you want to just stay there, you know? Mm-hmm. And the marshland is just, it's so perfect. Any comments about that, Lowell?
Well, I think that this really shows how much lighting does for the landscape. It really tied together the fences, the backdrop fences, the trees, the sculpture, the walkway. There's enough ambient light, I've noticed, to light the walkway and the area that goes down to the lake, whereas before it was kind of forbidding
yes.
to go that down there because it was totally dark, and this actually expanded the space a great deal for the evening. Mm-hmm. More than a person would actually imagine, and that's usually the way it is when you light an area. Mm-hmm. You get the other 12 hours of use out of it, And you have safety and a very good aesthetics where you can enjoy the work that you've done.
So if we might imagine, if let's pretend we're on the right-hand side of this picture, and we're actually a tenant in one of the units to the immediate right, Lakefront Plaza. What a wonderful view.
I would be thrilled.
Yeah, to be able to look at day, night, doesn't matter really. Mm-hmm. There it is. It's just gorgeous. It's like a photograph, right?
Yes.
This obviously is, but for them, it's like having this permanent photograph.
I remember when I put my lighting in my yard, the first couple of weeks, I'd get up
just
and go outside and walk through the garden because I just couldn't believe what it did.
Yeah.
It was just amazing how it transformed the landscape at night into something that was just alluring.
So this has helped from a safety perspective. It certainly has complemented an already wonderful piece and allowed it to be seen 24 hours a day, or at least as long as the lighting is on. I don't recall if that lighting runs around the clock or not. And it's not a waste of energy. Some people might be concerned about that because this is all LED lighting, so it's got a low demand, right, for energy.
Yes, I don't think that there's probably only 30 watts of power out there.
That's
for
amazing.
The entire thing.
And yet you get that amount of lighting and enhancement.
Yes, and it doesn't encroach on other areas. It's what's really nice is it kind of stays to itself. The ambient light fades away in a short distance, and it isn't on somebody else's project.
That's a great point, because that was exactly one of the things I wanted to say. So you are on the right-hand side, and you are light averse. You don't. I have not received a call or a complaint of any kind about those lights. In fact, what I get more is compliments from people saying thank you collectively for what you guys have done to that park, because it's kind of gone piece by piece by piece to where it is just one gorgeous park, and mm-hmm. It's each element has added up to that. Do we have one last picture there?
Black and white.
Okay, we have a black and white picture, and so you've got the two pictures that are kind of complementing one another. Lowell, any comments about this particular picture? It's pretty much the same aspect, only it's done in black and white.
Yeah,
right?
It's just in black and white. It's just it's kind of interesting, and just in the black and white, it has a certain attraction to it. In fact, I used it on my website for the opening page. Popped it in there.
Oh, great.
The black and white one.
That's wonderful.
Normally a person puts in the color, but this is a nice change.
Sure. So any other comments we want to make about the sculpture or the sculptor?
Well, it's a labor of love.
Mm-hmm.
It is something that you do when you're a sculptor or an artist. You work on your project until you don't want to do it anymore. If you're frustrated, it's something you should drop for the meantime and get back to later. And that's the way you get something that has a lot of your heart in it and a lot of feel.
So that's right, and thank you for reminding me. We were talking before we went on camera. Is this something that you punch in and punch out on a daily basis to do it? And you said, obviously, it's a rhetorical question, but the answer is absolutely no. Not. How long a time do you find yourself typically working on an art piece like this? Is it an hour, or 5 hours, or does it vary every time you walk up to it?
Well, sometimes it's an hour or two at a time, and other times I get a whole day, 8-10 hours, where I just can't stop. But I try to keep track of the time, and it's so sporadic. If I didn't punch a clock, I'm not going to know by the time I get down the road a couple of weeks into the project. Because a project like the one we have here in the park takes many hours. I don't know. I guess I worked on it over a period of about 5 weeks or so.
Okay.
5 to 6 weeks
Yeah.
before it was completed. And they're all different.
Sure.
It depends on how cooperative
The copper
the
is,
copper
huh? And your creativity. I mean, if it's
so-
right there at that particular
Yeah,
day.
sometimes it goes faster than other times. Everything goes well, just like everything a person does in their life.
Sure. You think that maybe there's 100 hours in there, or is that on the high side? Or the
That
low
would
side?
probably be on the high side. I would say I have maybe 60, 65 hours into that
Okay,
particular project.
that's still an awful lot of time, you know,
Yeah.
to try and put something like this. And is most of the time spent kind of at the end where you're trying to draw out those colors and kind of get everything just so? Or is it kind of even all the way through, you know, because first you got to do this, then you got to do that.
Well, every piece is different.
Oh,
There's every piece that goes into the project is different. For instance, I worked on an eagle's talon, and just on making 1 foot, it's taken me more than a day. Just trying to get the eagle's talon right.
Right.
Whereas another part of it goes so much faster. You go,
Yeah.
well, how did you accomplish all that in such a short time? Well, it's
hard to explain, I
hard.
imagine.
It's very hard to explain
Yeah.
because an eagle talon to me has to be detailed. It's
Right.
it's something people look at with detail.
Yeah. So how do you know? I mean, will you go to a book and look at, okay, I got to look at the foot of that eagle,
Yeah.
or is it something it's just up there? You know those details.
Well, I do. I look on the internet. I'll look at talons or feet of an animal, or
Right.
their pose, their stance, and then try to replicate that in my own version.
Right.
But getting everything in the right place gives it an identifiable look, where you can identify the species, and that's important.
Sure. Absolutely. So when we were talking about the 60 hours, that does not, let me put words in your mouth, I'm presuming that does not include the time you're spending looking at a book, trying to perfect something, or is that incorporated in the whole thing?
No, I've never. No, that's actual work. Actually,
Physical work.
physical work.
I got
The
you.
time I spend designing, planning, I don't count that.
Gotcha.
If I did, you know,
Yeah,
that would
I
be a good
retire
thing.
from it. So the evolution, because it first exists in your mind, right? And then it exists in front of you? Or is it almost concurrent where, okay, I got this idea, I'm going to put the 2 ducks like this, and I'm going to put the turtle about here. Does that then change? So, hey, wait a minute, that turtle doesn't belong there.
It usually doesn't change much. When you called me and told me about this, or when I heard from Corey about the contest,
Right.
I had already started parts of the project. I was working on the ducks and this so far in certain stages, and I usually don't do a drawing, but in order to do a submission,
Well, that's right, we asked that.
I had to do a sketch, and so I did a sketch for this one. But most things I do, you can't find a sketch because I didn't bother doing one.
Sure.
When I do one, I'm going, you know, that wasn't a bad idea to do one, because it does give you a kind of a visual guideline as you go.
Sure, and that was we as Rotarians, not being used to doing an RFP for anything artistic. We thought, well, we probably should have a sketch so we can figure out how do we compare this guy's to this guy's to this
Yeah.
guy's. As it turned out, you were the only one who made a proposal, and thank you so much for doing exactly that. As you're putting these things together, I think you told me before we went on camera that you work up until the point you start getting frustrated. And your experience has told you, once you hit that point, it's time to walk away.
Yes.
Do you want to expand on that at all? Is that something that happens every day, or is it?
Not always. It depends on the little thing that you're doing. It's usually a little thing that's very important, like
Right.
maybe the beak
Okay.
of on a bird.
Right. Which is going to get a lot of attention by viewers.
Yes, and if I don't think it looks good, if I find something wrong with it, it'll bother me forever.
Right,
So if it doesn't come easy, I do something else. And when I get back to it, it usually just goes surprisingly well.
It's like you've worked it out. Oh yeah, now I know how to do this.
Yeah, or I lost one of my thumbs or something. You know, I mean, you get all thumbs, you
Sure.
can't hard to do the work.
Gotcha. How many parts of Marshland are laying on the cutting room floor, if you know what I mean? Are there pieces where you just go, this is never going to get right, heck with it, I'm going to start over? Whether it's a beak or a talon or a wing or a...
I don't think I scrapped anything on that project.
But that does happen periodically?
Well, occasionally I'll remake something where it wasn't quite the right pattern. If it was the first pattern, the major part of making a sculpture is to first get a pattern for all of the animals and the elements that are going in there.
Uh-huh.
And when it comes to doing an animal or a bird, everything is made in a mirror image. And so the pattern, if the pattern is right, it forms into the shape that you want it to be. If it's not right, it's hard to work with. If it's slightly oversized, you go, gosh, the head on that critter is too big. Yeah. You know, sometimes I can shrink it, which is a new, yeah, sometimes not enough. If, you know, but as the years go by, you know when you've got it and
when you don't.
and when you don't. You know, if you don't and recognize it right away, you don't have to bother continuing. You start on a different version.
Have you ever finished a project and left it for a period of time, whether it's overnight or whatever, thinking that, man, oh man, this is a great piece, and then you go in there the next day and you look at it with your fresh eyes and you go, what was I thinking? And then you have to make tweaks.
That's never happened.
Oh, that's cool.
That's never happened. I have to like them as I go.
Yeah.
You know, I slow way down if it isn't going the way I would like it to go. It's kind of a delicate balance.
Sure. So there's someone out there in TV land who's watching us going, geez, I'd love to be a sculptor. How do they go about doing it? I know there's no one, method of doing it, or maybe there is. What would you recommend to them, Lowell?
Well, the way I started was I bought a piece of copper and I took a shear and cut the pattern of a flower in what I thought would be its one-dimensional form if it was laying flat. And
Okay.
it was an amaryllis that I was trying to replicate.
Okay.
And then I worked that into a shape and put a stem on it and vine and
You kind of
some
grew it.
leaves, and that was a garden lamp.
Oh,
And,
I see. Okay.
And that's how it all began. So I was self-taught. I just kept trying different
Yeah.
things, and
So for you, it was learned by doing, not necessarily watching someone else. Were you doing a
No,
lot
I
of
had
Google
never
stuff?
watched anyone. I'd never watched anyone
Really?
work copper, and
So you might be breaking all the rules.
I'm
just kidding. Apparently not, because they're doing very well. How long will something like that last? Like Marshland? Is that
Oh gosh, I would imagine.
we don't have to worry about it?
I
Is that
don't
what you're
think so.
saying?
I don't think so. You know, I don't know. You know, once the copper turns green, the patina is in place and the corrosion process stops. It doesn't go any
Past that.
further.
And that's why copper doesn't just disintegrate over time, right?
Yeah, and when they replaced the cathedral roof in St. Paul, I don't know how many years old that was, but remember it was green
Yeah,
when it had been replaced. Now it's brown.
sure. Just picking up on something else you said, when you do something, it's the mirror image, which is backwards. What did that mean?
Well, if I'm going to make the body of a bird,
You're making it from the inside, literally?
you have two pieces that are cut exactly the same,
Okay,
and you work them so that they form a
hole?
sphere type of thing,
I got you.
where the edges touch, and you can then begin to braze those edges, and then you have to grind them smooth to hide the seam and all of that.
Right, right.
But if the pattern isn't correct, then you wind up with a distorted looking figure.
Uh-huh.
And so that's a lot of it, is figuring out how to make a one-dimensional pattern that's going to turn out to be three-dimensional.
Three-dimensional, yes, yes.
And so it doesn't keep its form the way it was on the drawing board or on the computer.
Mhm.
It is it changes, and you have to take that into account. How much will it change?
In some areas, there'll be a lot of change, and some fairly little.
Yeah.
So it's not like you can just cut the
And
pattern.
it's surprising
couple
how
inches.
fast a person can catch on once they do it.
Uh-huh.
You just have to kind of remember where the differences were,
Sure.
and and how to adjust for them later. Everything doesn't have to be perfect. It just takes longer if it isn't.
Yeah. So you can make those changes,
Yes.
modify something. Geez, that one bird or that one thing didn't work out the way I wanted.
Yes, and I put my drawings on a computer and my designs on a computer so I can change them later. If I realize making a particular piece wasn't quite the right pattern, I can go back and change that part of the pattern so that if I do it again, it will be right.
Then you don't have to do it from scratch, as it were. You go back, oh yeah, that's the one I really liked, and that worked out well.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, that's right.
Super. All right. Anything else we've failed to talk about along
Well, I
the way
think
here?
we've talked about just about everything
Well,
here.
that's
as
good.
far
That
as
was the idea.
Copperwood goes.
That is great. Would you mind, for those people who might want to learn more about this or just chat with you and ask some questions, may we put your name and perhaps email address on the
Sure.
screen? Would you mind?
Sure, yeah, absolutely, yeah. So I have a direct email also that comes to my phone, and usually when people are talking about projects or inquiring about doing anything, that's the best way to
Okay.
get in touch with me, because we can start on it right away. And it's the easiest way for me to communicate, because I have that with me all the time.
There you go.
And,
And you're dynamic. You're not just sitting around waiting for something, right?
yes, yeah. We'd like to get right to it.
There you go. Lowell will get that on here, and that will be something, hopefully, that people can pick up and contact you on. Lowell Pajari, thanks very much for being on the program. Thanks for volunteering to do the sculpture for the Rotary Gateway to Lakefront Park and to the downtown. It's a wonderful, wonderful compliment. It's just kind of, all those park pieces just seem to fit together in just a tremendous
It's a good
whole.
feeling. I like it too.
Good for you. All righty.
Yes, hopefully, if there's anything else that is ever needed in a park, I'll get an opportunity to have my input and
Sure. Look around.
share
Make a
my
proposal.
ideas.
What the heck? You've got now the background having done it. There may be some other things in other parks. Good.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lowell. Thank you as well. We hope that the information that you glean from this program is useful to you as a resident in the Prior Lake area. Until next time, I'm Frank Boyle saying, have a great day.